service. And that was the first lesson in volunteering that was very helpful for me, and that is your service is not necessarily to the people that you think you're serving, but it is a lot to you, and it's a lot for them that you're there. And that's what it ended up being. And so that's the first part, is there's no pressure from the BVC to join the monastery, but the Benedictine life and the Benedictine values infuse themselves into what you do every day. And that is one of the best things. Especially, you will witness over a long period of time hospitality to everybody and hospitality to those who are hardest to give it to.
I really took the Benedictine values of community listening and awareness of God, and then incorporated them with the Vincentian values of meekness and humility and zeal, and just tried to form them to make me one person. So now I'm Benedictine and Vincentian.
Which was also neat that the sisters who are funding us and who had started this program are still volunteering at this after-school program, and they're very much about community, and they saw the community, there's only 4 of the sisters, in Newcastle. They saw the whole neighborhood community as part of their community and their family, and if they could, provide some paper and some pens and a block of wood for children to, get out their energy and be a positive influence, that was, they could just provide what they had and invite everyone in and be a listening ear and be a presence.
The most frustrating part of my program to me was actually also the part that most influenced me to want to go into education. Working in St. Cloud, it's a very diverse community. About 60% of the students in the school I worked on were in free and reduced lunch. All from very diverse backgrounds, and it was just really frustrating to me to see how some of the teachers in the school treated certain groups of children, how they kind of labeled them and stereotyped them, talk about them as those kids, like those kids can't learn, those kids are trouble, and that just, to me, was so frustrating and really disheartening. And that's one of the major reasons that I want to go into education, is to eliminate those stereotypes and let every kid know that he or she is worthy and capable of learning and success.
One of the hardest things for me was just how many questions my whole experience brought up. I worked with a population of people that were really struggling, and throughout the day I would meet with people that worked 2 or 3 jobs, but they were still struggling to get groceries, and so they needed to come and get food to get dinner for their kids. Or someone had just had their house burned down, and they never expected to need food assistance, but they were there. Or someone was terrified that they were going to be evicted at the end of the month because they didn't have enough money, and so that's why they were coming to get food assistance, because their money needed to go towards rent. And just dealing with all of these really difficult situations, but then knowing that I could go home at the end of the day and I had a house, I had food, and just like, how does that work? Like, why do I have these things? And so it just brought up a lot of questions, but I think that those difficult questions were really good, because it called my community to reflect on how we're living and how we're using the resources that we do have, and what we're called to do with them. And so I think they were extremely difficult, but it was a very helpful and influential piece of my year.
I mean, as far as the transition goes, I think it's more about applying what you took from your abroad experience into, how is that going to make you a different person?
I think for me a big part of the transition was kind of mentioned, but just figuring out how you can apply what you learned to just everyday life. And you really mentioned just being present. That was one key thing that I learned from my year, and just how I can really focus on being present in what I do now, and then also living simply, and just working out how to make my life the most simple that I can.
The hardest part of trying to find a more mainstream job was using my volunteer time on the resume. And that was something that it took a few job applications before I got that down. And at first I was listing volunteer, Benedictine Volunteer Corps, Ireland, Bahamas, whatever. But then I thought, after somebody pointed out to me, my father, that, well, you were a volunteer, but they know that by saying Benedictine Volunteer Corps. And so what were your job titles? And so all of a sudden, instead of being a volunteer for 2 years, it depended on the job, and so I tailored it to each resume, which is a good thing to do, or to each application. Each resume was tailored, and all of a sudden I was assistant guest master, or farm manager, or special projects director, because these were things that I was doing, and they were more titles that were bestowed upon myself, but agreed upon by the community, that all of a sudden it makes you so much more attractive to an employer, just because you weren't a volunteer, you were doing this while you were volunteering. And that, I don't know if it was the reason that I got the job that I ended up getting or not, but it certainly was a difficult transition to make until I figured that out.